Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, I would like to welcome all of you in another class of non-fiction prose. Today, our topic is The Subjection of the Women by John Stuart Mill. In this lecture, we will discuss some introduction of this essay and some key takeaways of this essay as well. I have made another second lecture of this topic, and in that lecture you will see the detailed explanation of this essay, the writing style of J.S. Mill, particularly about this very essay. So in this essay we will see the introduction and some key arguments and some key points. So let's start. The Subjection of Women was actually published in 1851. In 1869, English essay by J.S. Mill based on ideas he developed with his wife Harriet Taylor Mill. And this very essay argues for equality between the two sexes, men and women, largely on utilitarian grounds. This essay attacks marriage laws and the ideas that women are naturally versed at some things. The subjection of women is actually based on philosophical grounds. J.S. Mill is a philosopher and political economist and civil servant, so he rooted this very essay in philosophical and political and civil grounds. J.S. Mill published this very essay with the ideas he developed jointly with his wife Harriet Taylor Mill. Mill submitted the finished manuscript of their collaborative work on liberty in 1859. And soon after her untimely death in late 1858, and then continued work on the subjection of the women until its completion in 1861. At the time of its publication, the essay's argument for equality between the sexes was an affront to European conventional norms regarding the status of men and women. In his autobiography, Mill describes his indebtedness to his wife and his daughter Helen Taylor for the creation of the subjection of women. While scholars generally agree that J.S. Mill was the sole author, it is also noted that some of the arguments are similar to Harriet Taylor Mill's essay, The Enfranchisement of Women, and which was published in 1851. Mill was convinced that the moral and intellectual advancement of humankind would result in greater happiness for everybody. He asserted that the higher players of the intellect yielded for greater happiness than the lower player of the senses. J.S. Mill conceived of human beings as morally and intellectually capable of being educated and civilized. Mill believed everyone should have the right to vote, with the only exceptions being barbarians and uneducated people. Moreover, Mill argues that people should be able to vote to defend their own rights and to learn to stand on their 2 feet, morally and intellectually. This argument is applied to both sexes, men and women. Mill often used his position as a member of parliament to demand the vote for women, a controversial position for the time. In Mill's time, a woman was generally subject to the whims of her husband or father due to the social norms which said women were both physically and mentally less able than men and therefore needed to be taken care of. Contributing to this view were both hierarchical religious views of men and women within the family and social theories based on biological determinism. The archetype of the ideal woman as mother, wife, and homemaker was a powerful idea in 19th century society. At the time of writing, Mill recognized that he was going against the common views of society and was aware that he would be forced to back up his claims persistently. Mill argued that the inequality of women was a relic from the past, when might was right. A might has all the power, but it had no place in the modern world. Mill saw that having effectively half the human race, women unable to contribute to society outside of the home as a hindrance to human development. So, Mill attacks the arguments that women are naturally worse at some things than men and should therefore be discouraged or forbidden from doing them. He says that we simply don't know what women are capable of because we have never let them try. One cannot make an authoritative statement without evidence. We can't stop women from trying things because they might not be able to do them. So, it is not a solid argument. An argument based on speculative physiology is just that, speculation. In this, men are basically contradicting themselves because they say women cannot do an activity and want to stop them from doing it. So, Mill suggests that men are basically admitting that women are capable of doing the activity, but that men do not want them to do so. Whether women can do them or not must be found out in practice, in reality. We don't know what women's nature is because it is so wrapped up in how they have been raised. Mill suggests we should test out what women can and can't do, experiment. Women are brought up to act as if they were weak, emotional, docile, is a traditional prejudice. If we tried equality, we would see that there were benefits for individual women. They would be free of the unhappiness of being told what to do by men. And there would be benefits for society at large. It would double the mass of mental faculties available for the higher service of humanity. The ideas and potential of half the population would be liberated, producing a great effect on human development. So, in this way, Mill's essay is clearly utilitarian in nature on 3 counts. The first one, that the immediate greater good, the enrichment of society and individual development. If society really wanted to discover what is truly natural in gender relations, Mill argued it should establish a free market for all of the services women perform, ensuring a fair economic return for their own contributions to the general welfare. Only then would their practical choices be likely to reflect their genuine interests and abilities. Mill felt that the emancipation and education of women should have positive benefits for men also. The stimulus of female competition and companionship of equally educated person would result in the greater intellectual development of all. He stressed the insidious effects of the constant companionship of an uneducated wife or husband. Mill felt that men and women married to follow customs and that the relation between them was a purely domestic one. By emancipating women, Mill believed they would be better able to connect on an intellectual level with their husbands, thereby improving relationships. Mill attacks marriage laws, which he likens to the slavery of women. There remain no legal slaves save the mistress of every house. He alludes to the subjection of women becoming redundant as slavery did before it. He also argues for the need for reforms of marriage legislation whereby it is reduced to a business agreement, placing no restrictions on either party. Among these proposals are the changing of inheritance laws to allow women to keep their own property and allowing women to work outside the home, gaining independent financial stability, economic stability. Again, the issue of women's suffrage is raised. Women make up half of the population, thus, they also have a right to a vote, since political policies affect women too. He theorizes that most men will vote for those MPs who will subordinate women. Therefore, women must be allowed to vote to protect their own interests. Mill felt that even in societies as unequal as England and Europe, that one could already find evidence that when given a chance, women could excel. He pointed to such English queens as Elizabeth I or Victoria or the French patriot Joan of Arc. If given the chance, women would excel in other arenas and they should be given the opportunity to try. Mill was not just a theorist, he actively campaigned for women's rights as an MP and was the president of the National Society for Women's Suffrage. The way Mill interpreted subjects over time changed. For many years, Mill was seen as an inconsistent philosopher writing on a number of separate issues. Consistency in his approach is based on utilitarianism and the good of society, for the betterment of society, for the welfare of society. Nothing should be ruled out because it is just wrong or because no one has done it in the past. When we are considering our policies, we should seek the greatest happiness of the greatest number. This leads to attack on conventional views. If you wish to make something illegal, you need to prove that harm is being done. Individuals know their own interests best. The greatest good is understood in a very broad sense to be the moral and intellectual developments of society. Different societies are at different um, stages of development or civilization. Different solutions may be required for them. What matters is how we encourage them to advance further. We can say the same for individuals. Mill has a quite specific idea of individual progress, employing higher faculties, moral development, with people placing narrow self interest behind them. So, when we talk about the individual self reliance, we are independent, capable of change, and of being rational. Individual liberty provides the best route to moral development. As we develop, we are able to govern ourselves, make our own decisions, and not to be dependent on what anyone else tells us to do. Democracy is a form of self dependence, and this means personal liberty. As long as we do not harm others, we should be able to express our own natures and experiment with our lives. Liberty to govern our own affairs, civilized people are increasingly able to make their own decisions and protect their own rights. Representative government is also a useful way of getting us to think about the common good. So, liberty for women as well as men. All of Mill's arguments apply to both men and women. The previous ideas about the different natures of men and women have never been properly tested, properly evaluated. Women can participate in determining their own affairs too. So, it was an overall introduction of the subjection of women. Now I will try to uh, tell you the introduction in different points for your ease. So let's start. The subjection of women is based on the ideas of equality which J.S. Mill has developed with his wife Harriet Taylor Mill. This essay argues for equality between the sexes largely on utilitarian grounds. And in this essay, Mill attacks marriage laws and the idea that women are naturally worse at some things. This essay was published in 1869, but the essay The Enfranchisement of Women was published in 1851. So the inspiration was taken from The Enfranchisement of Women, which was published in 1851 by Harriet Taylor Mill, his wife, and J.S. Mill was indebted to his wife for the idea of this essay. This essay is a strong argument for equality between the two sexes. Moreover, it was an effort to European conventional norms regarding the status of men and women. In his autobiography, Mill describes his indebtedness to his wife and her daughter Helen Taylor for the creation of the subjection of women, and it is also noted that some of the arguments are similar to Harry Taylor Mill's essay because the inspiration came from the enfranchisement of women, and this essay was published earlier than J.S. Mill's The Subjection of Women. So, this essay argues in favor of legal and social equality between men and women on both grounds, legal and social as well. He says that the legal subordination of one sex to the other is wrong in itself. Moreover, he also points out that it is one of the chief hindrance, chief hurdle, major hurdle to human improvement and human development, as women are the half of the population. So if they deprived to grow in the society, it may harm the society and definitely harm the society. Now I will try to put some key takeaways for your ease step by step. The first key takeaway is social and legal difference. J.S. Mill states that goal of this work is to demonstrate that the social and legal dynamic between men and women is wrong and one of the chief hindrance to human improvement. So this is the first key takeaway. The second one is opinion on different matters. He has held this view for as long as he has had opinions on social or political matters. The third one is suggestion for complete equality. In place of the existing social and legal dynamic, Mill suggests complete equality, admitting no power or privilege on the one side nor disability on the other side. So equal, there should be an equality between men and women. The next one is women's inferiority. Mill notes the difficulty of demonstrating the inequality between men and women, not because evidence is lacking, but because the idea of women's inferiority is rooted in feelings rather than arguments. The next one is stability of opinion. When opinion is rooted in the feelings, it gains a stability, and this stability of the idea is hard to handle despite the strong rational arguments against their feeling based opinion. The next one is fallacious reasoning and justifications. Consequently, people invent justifications and engage in fallacious reasoning when feeling based opinions are challenged by strong arguments. The next one is barbaric social customs. Because a custom, institution, or law has endured for a long time, that custom, institution, or law is not necessarily less barbaric or better supported by fact. Therefore, women are considered inferior to men, have endured a less supported era of progress. High standards of evaluation. Mill explains at length the difficulty of arguing in favor of the equality of men and women. Usually unfair high standards are used to evaluate the arguments that women and men should be socially and legally equal. The understands are unfair because they differ from the way both logical arguments and legal cases usually handle the burden of proof. So the next one is exemplification. Here he puts some examples. Usually the burden of proof lies with the affirmative. For example, the prosecution in a criminal case must prove our defendant is guilty, while the defense need to prove the defendant is innocent. A scholar arguing that a battle occurred at a specific time and place in history must provide the evidence that this event occurred. On the other hand, skeptics need to provide evidence that event did not occur. So here he tried to exemplify his idea. The next one is liberal society's favor of liberty. Mill notes in Progressive that in liberal societies there is a presumption exists in favor of liberty and freedom, which is the same as a presumption against limitation and bondage. Number 11 is the judgment by feeling. Here Mill argues that the rules change when feeling and habit judge that something is true or not. Mill states that to show women should considered equal to men, he should be expected not to answer all that has ever been said by those who take the other side of the question, but to imagine all that could be said by them. Next, feeling surpassed with reason. Here Mill argues that the prevailing intellectual climate of the 19th century is the overreaction of the 18th century's intellectual climate. So it is accord to unreasoning elements in human nature, the inflexibility which the 18th century is supposed to have ascribed to the reasoning elements. So we can say in other words that feelings now surpassed over reasons. Feelings has controlled the reason. The next one is the conclusion of Mill's argument. Thus Mill explains the structure of his argument, and he shows how the opinion that women are inferior to men is based on prejudice and untested presumption rather than on reason and proven fact. To strengthen his argument, he provides a counterclaim, and in counterclaim, Mill presents that some questionable evidence might exist supporting the idea that women should be subjugated by men. Next one is the social arrangements for equality. Here he imagines that at the dawn of civilization, various social and legal arrangements were tried by a society. This imaginary society supposedly tried arrangements in which men and women were legally and socially equal. In these arrangements, women were completely subjected to men. To strengthen his notion, he provides the note of caveat. Mill notes this caveat even in this imaginary case. For the subjection of perpetuate, it would need to be demonstrated that this arrangement continued to lead the happiness and well-being of all people. So in short, the experimentation with alternate social arrangements would have to continue consistently. The next one is the sense of inferiority in women. The ancient arrangements in which women are subjected to men came about because every woman, owing to the value that is attached to her by men, combined with her inferiority in muscular strength, and it was found in a state of bondage to some man. As a general rule, Mill states the first laws of a society simply take existing social arrangements and enshrine them by legislation which is enforced by punishment. A comparison between subjection and slavery. Comparing the subjection of women to slavery, Mill argues that the masters, who binding themselves to one and another for protection guaranteed by their collective strength and the private possessions of each. In short, both women and slaves were considered as possessions which are owned by men, just as a parcel of land or a horse would be owned. So, just like a horse or just like a parcel of land, the women were owned by their men. So, how the subjection in current times? Although the subjection of women is not as extreme as it was in primitive times or in antiquity, yet it has not lost the tenet of its brutal origin. Importantly, the situation of women is in Mill's time is simply a somewhat softened version of the same ancient arrangement. Mill argues that continuous existence of does not count in favor of its effectiveness to deliver justness to women. Lack of proclamation. Mill argues that the subjection of women persists largely because it does not proclaim its own origin, and as discussion has not brought into light with its true character and is not felt to jar with modern civilization. The origin of the subjection. The reason the unjust origin of the subjection is not known, Mill claims, is because most people don't study the history and have not been to more primitive parts of the world where rule of the strong prevails, openly acknowledged and accepted as just. On the other hand, Mill provides an example of a Roman Republic. People of the noble and governing classes treated each other with mutual respect and recognized rights beyond what a person could obtain by force. In these ancient republics, noble and ruling classes harshly oppressed lower classes, slaves, and women. However, the small achievement of noble treating each other equally represented a step forward. So, what is the conclusion of this essay? That any purported evidence based on the accomplishments of women in comparison to men does not count, because women are legally or socially barred from pursuing such accomplishments, for example, in politics or business. Again, Mill insists the only way to settle the matter to try a different social arrangement. So finally, Mill reiterates his case that confidence in the view of male superiority and male dominance of women is misplaced. There is no presumption in favor of that view, and indeed reason to believe that it is false. The overall goal of Mill's essay is to argue for the conclusion that the principle which regulates the existing social relations between the two sexes, the legal subordination of one sex to the other is wrong in itself and now one of the chief hindrances to human development. Mill argues that the subordination of women is both wrong in itself because unjust and wrong due to its consequences because it promotes misery and prevents good. It is generally thought in discussing political matters that the burden of proof lies with those who seek to restrict liberty, and the presumption is in favor of freedom and equal treatment. But in considering the situation of women, the burden of proof is reversed. Why? Because it is commonly maintained that what is customary is presumed correct, and it is customary that women should be subordinate. So what is natural is presumed correct, and it is natural that women should be subordinate. So Mill will critique each of these claims. Mill points out that we should presume what is customary to be correct only if we can be confident that the custom owes its existence to its soundness. So we should ask, does our society subordinate women because it is a sound policy to do so? And he points out that there has never been a trial of any other policy, so we cannot pretend that our experience has proven that it is best policy. The policy was not adopted as a result of deliberation because laws and systems of polity always begins by recognizing the relations they find already existing between individuals. They convert what was a mere physical fact into a legal right, give it the sanction of the society. If men had ever been found in society without women, or women without men, or if there had been a society of men and women in which the women were not under the control of the men, something might have been positively known about the mental and moral difference which may be inherent in the nature of each. So, what is now called the nature of women is an eminently artificial thing, and the result of force, repression in some directions, unnatural stimulation in other. Even if it were natural for women to function in their current social role, this would not justify their legal and political subordination, since nature doesn't need any help to enforce what's natural. The anxiety of mankind to interfere on behalf of nature for fear lest nature should not succeed in effecting its purpose is an altogether unnecessary solicitude. From this, Mill concludes that the presumed naturalness of women's subordination cannot be sustained as a basic for their ongoing subjection. So the overall essay harps on the string that there should be an equality prevails between there should be an equality between both sexes, men and women. Both are equal, both have equal rights, so women should not be subjected to their men. So that's all the idea. So that's all from my side. In next lecture, inshallah, we will see the detailed discussion about this essay. We will also discuss the diction and writing style as well, and some more things. So till then, Allah Hafiz.